2 level 1 classes and 1 level 2 class. And I've been reviewing and going over with them a lot before I started a new material. Because yes, we are in our department, we are really worried about these students, because, as you mentioned, the pandemic, um, we didn't, it's not the same, we cannot cover the same material. It's kind of difficult to meet with them. So I've been trying to go over the material from level 1 first before to start a new material. And we are trying to do that for next semester as well, because, apparently we're going to continue with this situation. So basically, yes, going over, reviewing, remind them, and then try to incorporate those skills from level 1 on level 2. I try to do that too. For example, I made a project recently in which they have to, I think it was about clothing. So I incorporate those vocabulary and grammar that they got from level 1 into the new material. And I made a project in which they have to use both. And I provide them then the list from level 1 and the grammar skill from level 1, so they can incorporate and put them together in one project. It was interesting. They like it.
I think that concept has become more prominent because of COVID. However, that's not a topic that's new to us, at least not in my experience. I've historically taught Spanish 2 the most. I've taught all levels, but I've taught Spanish 2 the most online. And so we always get students who are all over their place. And it's really unique since I'm a teacher for the North Carolina Virtual Public School, and we serve students from all schools and districts all over North Carolina and now some outside. Their experiences can be extremely different from Spanish 1. You have some students who literally watch Disney movies for their whole entire Spanish 1 class, to others who had just phenomenal Spanish 1 teachers who are already kind of at that Spanish 2 level. And so again, I'm trying to meet the needs of all of our students, recognizing that they're all over the place. We have to, again, think about and assess in the very beginning, what do they know and what can they do? And go ahead and make sure that we allow time built in. So what we did for Spanish 2 specifically is build in an opportunity for students to glean the knowledge that they should already have, so that we can start out all on the same page. So for example, in our course, we have the very first unit after the getting started technology, orientation type stuff. Our very first unit is an intensive review of Spanish 1, because we acknowledge that they come from all different points. And so we don't want that to be a barrier or a limitation for them accessing our content and being able to move forward. And so we have it built in. And so we also meet with our students one-on-one and in conversations with them, try to grasp kind of what is your prior knowledge and your prior experience. And then based on the information that we get from those students, then we can really hone in and target, pull small groups or individual, and work with those students one-on-one or in small groups to fill in any gaps that might exist. So we were doing that long before COVID. I think what we're seeing now is the need for that to be a thing for everybody. It might not have been as, again, prominent in other areas, but I think that that's changing. So I think in integrating something into the curriculum, being communicative with your students and just forming those relationships with your students, knowing exactly what they, where they come from, their experiences, what they know and can do, and then creating some sort of plan, whether it's formal, it doesn't have to be formal. I'm a big note taker. So when I talk with them, every little thing, I just take notes. So I have like my internal notes that they never see, that kind of informs me. If I'm like, oh, well, Juan, I talked with Juan and here's his experience, then he doesn't know that that exists, but I can just pick up because it's very easily, as we know as online teachers, if you have such a huge caseload or workload of students, you want to make sure that they're still getting that personalized attention and you know exactly what their situation is and can differentiate. So I think that that's a big piece, both curriculum, instructionally, and then communication with the teacher as well.
I have two completely opposite scenarios. I have kids that definitely need the remediation because they stopped working last March and then didn't work again until September, when they got enrolled in the next level of the course. But they don't, those, not all, but in this scenario that I'm mentioning, the kids that just didn't want to work and still don't want to work but need the class to graduate, it's a real struggle because they don't want remediation. They just want to pass. They don't want to master. They just want the course to be made easy for them and for there to be no penalties and for them to just pass. And those students are not what we're talking about here, but they bring things down. Here, what we're talking about, the kids that want to master the concepts, they want to actually learn the French 2 curriculum, but they can't learn all of it in the amount of time they have because of circumstances that were beyond their control. Those kids need the remediation. That's where I try to break it down into what are the top 10 words instead of the 20 words that we need this week. What is the big grammar concept? And if there are 6 verbs that mean to go or to walk or to move through a place or to pass, let's focus on the 2 that they'll probably actually use. And teach them some strategies that when you see it in context, maybe through context, you'll be able to tell that that was a synonym that you don't really know, but you can still understand enough to get the context, but by focusing on what they need so that when they're producing language, it is smaller, that they're able to produce language at their level, that still lets them show that they can talk about going shopping. It still lets them show that they can talk about where they went yesterday or whatever the topic is without having to worry about the kids don't know how to say that they're going to go ice skating. They're probably never been ice skating. So why do I worry about that vocabulary? Focus on what they are going to say that they did yesterday.
So to kind of assist where students are, we have several kind of review and pre-assessment type assignments in the course that vary from review quizzes that are auto-graded just to kind of get their feet wet in practice to more summative writing and speaking assignments and or projects. In addition, we have phone calls where we talk with students, and depending on their situation, I know one thing that comes up with Spanish in particular is whether a student is a native speaker or not, or especially with Spanish because Spanish is so widely spoken and studied. So they might have attended an immersion school in elementary. And so even though they've not taken formal Spanish classes, they have a pretty good proficiency in Spanish, but we need to know that. So sometimes just doing oral interviews with the students is important, depending on what their previous experiences have had that happen several times as well. So some things that are scripted in the course, but then also just that communication with the students that you have to figure out exactly where they are.
During testing, when I test them, when I do the assessment, the final assessment, for example, recently we had a test and they it was one particular area that they really didn't do well. And I was like, no, we cannot continue, because this is really important. It was the AR verbs. And then I went back, I reviewed with them, I gave them more practice, and then I repeat the assessment. Because, you know, it's not it's not more important right now to cover material, but they could master what they are, learning. Mhm.
We do a lot of pre-tests and then post-tests, and then we have a lot of little quizzes before we get to the kind of the performance-based tasks or the proficiency kind of tasks. And so if a kid is totally not able to do a vocab quiz or a grammar quiz, then they're not going to be able to do well on the bigger task either. And so a lot of times, I don't like to wait until the end of the unit when it's too late. I like to see that you're not doing well with these little tasks that don't count much in the grade, but if you can't do those, you're only going to get overwhelmed and frustrated when you try and do the bigger tasks. And so I think, as a teacher, I the you just need to be aware of where your students are, be aware of what their actual progress is. Don't just grade without looking at kind of a bigger picture of, okay, that's great that I just went down a list of things to grade, but what does that mean? What kids struggled to reach it? And then reach out to those kids and offer them a tutoring session. I have some kids that love that and love, now in this world of not seeing people very much, if I schedule a tutoring session, I'll get tons of kids there, which I didn't used to. So that's been a difference. They'll show up and they want the help. Or for the kids that are hiding from that, then I can try and send them other resources or the recording of the tutoring session and say, please watch this and let me know what questions you have. And sometimes the shy kids or the kids that are just really overwhelmed will do that and say, oh, now I get it. Can I try again? And I like to definitely offer the kids to try again, because the goal is for them to master the content, not for them to get bad grades, or good grades. The goal is for them to master the content. So by trying to stay present with the students, it allows for me to have a bigger idea of what do they need.
I try to meet with them privately. Some of them ask me, for example, to meet after class, or we try to set a moment, a date in which we can meet. So I try to meet with them to explain to them. I have, especially with my level 2 class, is really, we have a great dynamic. I have a great, interaction with them, because they are in my last class on my 4th period, and they like to stay with me, like, class ends at 3:30 and they like to stay with me until 4 o'clock sometimes, and I don't mind. I stay with them, I help them, because I know that level is more difficult, and also because they are struggling with things that they didn't get on level 1. So I try to do that as much as possible, emails or meet with them, not in the class but after class.
Very similar, whether it's through their work or through conversations or in live classes, and it's apparent that you have students who, again, are kind of all over the place. Depending on how many and where they are, if small groups are appropriate, I might pull a small group of students if they all have kind of the same need. But a lot of times it's just, I am a big fan of one-on-ones. I think it kind of lowers their affective filter a little bit and makes it more personable. Just, it's like, hey, let's talk about this. It's very conversational. It's not like, you did this wrong. It's like, hey, let's talk about this and talk through this and practice a little bit. And that, I think, also is important, because I've already established the relationship with them and they're used to me contacting them, and whether it's via text message or whatever. So it's not like they don't get defensive. It's not a gotcha. So I do a lot of one-on-ones, and in those one-on-ones, I will work with them based on whatever skills they might be missing, to really pull them up. And then in regards to the feedback within the course, that's one of the biggest components of making sure that students get exactly what they need. So in addition to communication and the live classes, which you're kind of spewing the content to everybody and answering questions, my biggest thing outside of that communication would be feedback. So feedback in the course, to me, should be very personal. It should be very specific to the student and the assignment and what those learning outcomes are. And so while I do have kind of a set core group of feedback components, I always make sure to personalize that. And then based off of their writing or speaking, then I can hone in exactly on, oh, well, this is an adjective agreement thing. And then I can go and explain and reteach and provide resources there. For the students who are the higher end learners through the feedback, then that's an opportunity for me to say, hey, this is a great idea. You should research this more, or have you thought about this topic, and provide that supplemental, that additional material that might excite them, or provide, for example, extra credit opportunities where they might seek out learning, not just even in Spanish, but in other languages.
Comes down to the ones that need remediation that are willing to be remediated. Um, because I could spend a lot of my effort and energy on kids that really don't care. And all I've done is spin myself in circles, versus the kids that do care, but really do want to learn. And I try to do breakout sessions where I pull those kids in. I try to do that earlier in the unit so that they can kind of like bridge the gap between one and the other and kind of move on, even though they're not really there, but try to keep them moving. Because if they get behind, then that can be, it could just be insurmountable and they'll just want to give up. We have a pacing guide that we have to follow, and it moves forward. Now I can make some tweaks, but in general, it moves forward. So I need to keep the kids moving. So even if they aren't at the exact same, they need to stay moving so that they don't get overwhelmed. And that can be a challenge. But what I'll do if the kids actually show up for my tutoring, which, as I said, this semester they've been amazing, and they show up and they really care and they're really engaged in those kinds of sessions, I can use what we do together and then put that in as the assignment that they didn't do well on. So they don't have to retake it and take up more of their time. They came to tutoring. They don't need to come to tutoring and go back and redo it. I need them to move on. And so by getting a big picture and making the grade book reflect the big picture, then we can move on.
I had a student that he was switched to my class from face-to-face to virtual, but at the same moment, he had some medical issues. And it was kind of difficult because it was just when we were finishing the first quarter. And he was on the edge. But we were successful. We also, his mother was very helpful. We were in contact all the time. I like when parents, contacted me, and then we are working together, helping each other. So we were doing, trying to encourage him even when he had those medical issues. So, and then successfully, yes, he could make it.
I've had from time to time, we get students who, especially online, they're taking a course because online either maybe it doesn't fit in their schedule, or they have medical problems, or medical problems come up. And so I can think of one girl specifically who was just she was struggling actually with mental health issues. And so she had this pattern. She would be great, and then she, would kind of fall off, and then she'd be great, and then she'd fall off. And then she just totally went incognito. And so I just made sure to reach out to her and communicate with her at first. She got frustrated because she had missed so much. And so, I just constantly tried to reassure her and say, it's okay. Like, life happens. Don't worry about it. Let's come up with a plan to make sure that you can succeed. Don't worry about the rest of the students. Don't worry about, let's come up with something that works for you. And so through that constant reassurance and then creating a plan where we did meet regularly, she started to submit her work, although she was behind. But then she felt like I had truly invested in her. And I think that's a really big component, just like with a traditional classroom. Like, our kids want to know that people care about them and that they're there to support them. And so she went from totally being incognito to being re-engaged, and then coming back and just being super thankful that I stuck with her, and and she was able to be successful in the end, which was, what our ultimate goal is. So, we focus a lot of time so much on the content and the standards, which are very important, but just, again, that reassuring piece for students to know that, even though we're not physically with them and sometimes they can't always see us, like, we are their teachers, and we're, we want to help them grow and succeed, and we care about them. And just that constant reminder is so important for so many students.
Yes, actually, this semester I've had a student in my French 2 class. So this was the second semester with me and was a fully online class. She was one of the students who was extremely camera shy and who in 1001 did not want to participate in the video discussion boards or anything. And this semester she did, and she was still very shy on camera, and I could barely hear her sometimes, but she did it. And she was very artistic, and I switched an assignment where I asked them to either write a story or make a comic, and they could use an online comic strip maker, or they could actually make their own comic. And I transformed this assignment with her specifically in mind because I knew that she was very much into drawing and painting and things like this. And she did a beautiful comic, and she really poured her heart into it. And that was really wonderful. So I could see like the semester progressing, and she was getting more and more engaged with the content, and she was being less and less shy. And that was really nice to see.
I have more non-success stories, unfortunately, but I do have one really good success story. It was actually a student who lives right around the corner from me, although I never let her know that. But the student really had a lot of challenges with a lot of different things that were not her fault. The school issued Chromebook wouldn't connect to her home Wi-Fi. There were 5 people trying to work at the same time. And so she had to borrow a siblings, and one of the siblings wasn't issued one. Lots of like challenges that weren't big. She wasn't sick, but yet it was a struggle every day to try to log in. And so when she finally did, she realized, I'm already 2 weeks behind, and that is overwhelming. I just want to give up. And so we met in a Zoom room. We were able to do that finally once she got caught up, and she was able to show me what she mastered. I had sent her a chart of like, you tell me what you think you can do. And so she shared it back with me of the things that she thought she could do. And so we were able to quickly go through those, not spend much time on that, so that then we could focus on what do you think that you don't know? What do you not know from French 1? And now we're in unit 2 of French 2. What do you not know? So we could tailor most of the tutoring time to that. And it really worked. I just let her skip the entire review unit and start, and that let her feel confident. The same student, though, then was one who got COVID, and over Thanksgiving fell again back behind, fell about 2 weeks behind because she had not worked. And we were able to do the same thing where it was a kind of a checklist. It was an eLinguafolio type of thing where she was able to show me what she did know, what she thought she knew, and what she knew that she didn't know, so that we could tailor it again. And I could, again, go back and kind of exempt some assignments, still keep some assignments, but let her feel that it was at a pace where she was not digging a hole, but she could get out of it and show mastery. And she's going to move on to French 3, and she should. She's ready for it.